Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. The New York Immigration Coalition unites almost 200 community-based organizations that work to assist and protect immigrants in locations all over the state. Thanu Yakupitiyage manages the coalition's communications to ensure that immigrants' voices are heard and their concerns addressed, and she's my guest today. Welcome. I'm sorry, I had so much trouble with your name.
Oh, no, that was fine. That was
It's such a pretty name. What does it mean?
It means the rhythm of music.
Well, we'll have to come back to that subject in a little while. How many immigrants does New York State have?
There's about 4.4 million immigrants in New York State.
And out of those, undocumented?
There's a little less than a million.
A little less than a million.
Yeah.
So it's a high percentage of our general population. It's over 20%, right?
Yeah. I mean, and
not the undocumented, but just immigrant communities.
And one thing to note, and New York City and New York State has historically been a gateway for immigrant communities dating back to when the U.S. was founded.
Yeah.
So, from people coming through Ellis Island, the Statue of Liberty is sort of this symbol of all of that. And so that's why New York State has always had many immigrants.
Yeah, most of us.
Most of us are immigrants.
Right. So these 200 organizations are really located all over the state.
Yes.
And do they reflect in a way the pockets of different countries' immigrants?
Yeah, so we, the community-based organizations that we work with represent all of the different communities. And the New York Immigration Coalition sort of exists to be a political vehicle for everyone to work together. Because otherwise you're in your silos and you're dealing with your different populations. So we have groups who work specifically with Arab and Muslim communities, groups that work with South Asian communities, groups that work with Korean and Chinese communities, African communities, Polish and Eastern European communities, Caribbean, Haitian. So it's really all of us together where we're trying to make a difference to the lives of all immigrants. And really to make a statement that, immigrants really are a fabric of America and a fabric of New York.
And each of these organizations is almost like an organic growth because they're created because of the needs of their groups of people.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So they do more hands-on work. They assist in legal and health, anything, filling out everything.
Yeah. So it's they're very directly associated with communities.
And then the coalition is the umbrella.
Yeah, and we do a lot of the sort of policy work. A lot of times these smaller CBOs are really strapped. They have hundreds of clients. They're doing direct legal services. They're providing citizenship classes. They're, doing English language classes. They're providing healthcare. And so when you're doing the day-to-day sort of activities of putting a Band-Aid on issues, you really do need support in terms of looking at the larger legislation and policy. And so that's what we do on the city, state, and national level.
There was an article in a recent New Yorker magazine quoting a woman who handles legal affairs in a small Brooklyn organization. And she said that people don't realize how difficult it is just straight out to help immigrant communities. And it's always been stressful and very difficult. But now she looks at the future and thinks instead of just being difficult and stressful, it's really going to be it's a tragedy.
Yeah.
And so there's been a big change in the recent months.
Yeah, I mean, so I think this election was very important. It was really going to define where the United States headed and really what values people stood behind. And the election of now President-elect Donald Trump has really caused a lot of fear in immigrant communities and in other communities as well, in LGBTQ communities, in Black communities, in Jewish communities.
In regular communities.
In regular communities.
Everybody is.
Yeah, I think that the president-elect have made a lot of really vitriolic and scapegoating comments towards immigrant communities. And even as president-elect on a 60-minute interview, he said that he would deport 2 to 3 million people. He says 2 to 3 million criminals, and yet there are no statistics to actually verify this number that he's made up. And so we're very concerned because essentially what the president-elect and his new cabinet and administration are going to do is really create categories to make people criminals. And that's what we're really concerned about. And in a time where already legal service organizations are so strapped in terms of resources, if this administration pulls resources out of, federal resources out of out of supporting immigrants, then you really have a really dire situation with, hundreds of thousands of people who are, scared that they're going to be torn apart from their families. And already the courts are filled. Overwhelmed. And so...
and we've always historically had problems with people in an immigration court without any representation.
Exactly.
And children who go without any representation.
Exactly.
Translations.
Yep.
Tell me the scope of problems that you have ordinarily.
Yeah, so in immigration courts, some of the issues, like you mentioned, there is really a lack of lawyers in order to represent all of the cases. And so what happens is that oftentimes you'll have one lawyer with too many cases to handle. Oftentimes there are language barriers, or you may have a situation where an individual does not speak English and therefore doesn't understand what's happening with the lawyer. You also have situations where immigrants end up in situations where a lawyer or someone who poses as a lawyer says that they can help someone to get a green card or, to stay in this country if you just pay whatever amount of money, and the person ends up paying the money and that individual leaves without a trace or gets that person into a worse situation than they already are.
And that's what we call exploitation?
Exactly, it's fraud.
Is that a law now in the state? Did it pass?
So there's an anti-fraud bill that's in City Council right now.
Oh, it's in the City Council?
Yeah, it's Intro 746, and we actually just had a press conference last week about it, and hopefully it will pass. But Governor Cuomo on the state level has pushed this Office of New Americans, and one of the things that they do is also push back against fraud.
And health services is it a question of being covered by Medicaid? I mean,
Yeah.
Who's covered by Medicaid, for instance, if you need them?
Yeah, Medicaid. So I'm not an expert on the health stuff. We have an entire health team. If you are undocumented, you are not covered.
Yeah.
So Medicaid is for people who are sort of legally present, who either are U.S. citizens or green card holders. But one of the things that we've been pushing for is really healthcare for all, in New York State, because a lot of families in New York State are mixed status families. You might have a mother who's undocumented and a child who's a U.S. citizen, and that poses a lot of problems in the health context when a mother is trying to take her child to the doctor if her child's in serious need, right? I mean, that child will get healthcare because she's a U.S. citizen, but what happens to the mother? And so,
what happens if you're undocumented and you have a health emergency and you go to a hospital? If you're in a sanctuary city, you're all right because they're not going to report it?
No.
But if you're in a smaller town, what happens?
So if you're in a smaller town, currently New York State and counties within New York State are not collaborating with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So if you are in a dire situation and you need to go to the hospital, in New York City you can do that. Outside of the city it's a little bit more complicated, but you won't get reported. The issue is what's going to happen with this new administration, right? Because they want to really shift the rules and make it extremely difficult if you are undocumented to access any type of service. We saw that happening with state legislation in Utah, for example. In Utah, what they were trying to do was make it so that even if someone needed to get their pipe fixed for a water burst, they had to show their papers. And this individual who's now in President-elect Trump's cabinet, Chris Kobach, was really the architect of a lot of the anti-immigrant laws that states were trying to pass, including SB 1070 in Arizona, which was considered the Show Me Your Papers law, where the police had the right to stop anyone who they quote unquote thought looked illegal, whatever that means. In Utah, where you had to show your papers in order to get basic services. Those are the kinds of anti-immigrant laws that individuals on his cabinet have supported. And so the big question is what's going to happen in 2017 and for the next 4 years if that's the type of stuff.
These
that's
are people
upheld.
Being considered for the cabinet. Then there isn't a cabinet.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, that's
people
all right.
being considered for the
Right.
cabinet, including Chris Kobach.
Yeah. He's the one that was really pinpointed over the weekend as being the most drastic. He even had his papers exposed to the camera, right?
Yes.
Incredible. But in the government, Trump threatens then to penalize cities and states that do protect their immigrants. So that's even worse, right? So immigrants have problems with ID cards. Is it only New York City that has a special ID?
No, there's several cities, including New Haven and Oakland, that have these things called municipal IDs, and you can get that regardless of immigration status. So in New York, we have ID NYC, and it's a great program. Essentially, you can get that ID regardless of your immigration status, and it really is a symbol of being a New Yorker. And one of the great things about ID NYC is that it provides you discounts and access passes to different cultural institutions. So if you're like me and you like arts and culture, it's a great way to sort of access a lot of what New York City has to offer and make that available to everyone.
Now, education, the public schools in the state will teach anybody.
Yeah, so if you are in the U.S., it is your right to be educated. In New York City and state, if you are a young person here, you have the right to go to school. And so, they can't take that away from anyone. There are, in other states, for example, Georgia passed a law where if you were undocumented, you couldn't access higher education. And so there is a way, again, in which different states have been trying to bar undocumented people from being able to
go on to college.
In
New York, you can go on?
Yes.
But you have to pay the tuition.
Exactly.
You can't get financial aid?
No, so that's the one of the big fights in New York State has been for the New York State DREAM Act. And what that would basically allow is for undocumented immigrants to also access financial aid. And that has not as of yet passed, even though Governor Cuomo has at different points said that he is supportive of it.
Has the New York public school system integrated yet translation services?
Yeah, so we work very closely with the Department of Education. We've been doing a lot of work with them really to provide translation. Earlier this year in January, actually, we had a big win where the Department of Education expanded their translation services so that parents can more easily access translation. Prior to January of this year, there was really only 4 individuals within Department of Education for 75 schools. Which was just it's not feasible in a city like New York where you have millions of immigrants.
Right. How many young people are here covered by DACA? What does that stand for? The DREAM Act?
Yeah, so DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And DACA basically is a temporary status. A little background of it. So basically, in 2001, there was a lot of there was this push for this thing called the DREAM Act. And the DREAM Act would have basically been a legislation that provided a path to citizenship for young people who came to the U.S. under the age of 16, who, if through 4 years in college or by 2 years in the military, would eventually be able to get their green card and become a citizen. The argument being that they came to the U.S., when they were children, they didn't know what was happening. Why should they be penalized at all? That came very close to a vote in 2010.
In the Congress.
Yeah, it passed the House, but it passed the House, but it did not pass the Senate. After that, what advocates started to do was to be like, well, you need to at least stop the deportations of all of these young people who are at risk. So in 2014, was it 2014 or is it?
It didn't matter. It's
2014, President Obama passed.
It was a regulation, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it was an executive order. It was, I think, 2012. An executive order that basically was called Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals that would protect young people under the age of 16 but the cap was 30.
The age of 30.
Yeah, so you had to be under the age of 30 or under at the time that you get DACA, and it would provide you a protection from deportation and also a work permit. But it's still a temporary status. So by having DACA, you can't, it's not like you can become a green card. It's not a path to citizenship.
And it's also at the whim of the executive.
Exactly.
So that's a new fear that has now been injected.
Exactly. So nationally, there's over 800,000 young people who have DACA. In New York City, there's about 30 to 40,000 young people who have DACA. And one of the big fears is that President-elect Trump, he said that he would get rid of all the executive orders that President Obama put into action. And if he gets rid of DACA, he's basically putting over 800,000 young people at risk who, over the last 4 years, have really demonstrated that providing some sort of reform works, that these individuals who couldn't work and now are working. Some of them are lawyers, some of them are advocates and policy people. Like, they are actually giving back to the economy. The economy has grown.
It's worth it. We've had over $1 billion
Exactly
injected into the economy.
And actually, it's like
figured out.
close to 48 billion that would be lost if they take DACA away.
Now, on the other side, you have parents who are here undocumented, but the children were born here and they're citizens.
Yeah.
What happens is there's been no program to protect them.
No, so President Obama in 2014, excuse me. So in 2012, DACA passed. In 2014, he tried to put into action this thing called Deferred Action for parents of U.S. citizen children. And that was blocked by states. By Texas was the first state, and then several other states jumped on. And it went to the Supreme Court this year, and the Supreme Court had a 4-4 tie, meaning that they did not decide on the merits of DAPA.
But they didn't recognize.
But they didn't recognize, so it can't move forward. So that means that parents who are undocumented are still at risk of deportation.
It's the children who are come across illegally and then are either, some of them are allowed to go to their relatives but have to appear in court. Are some of them still interned in places?
Yeah, so what you're referring to is actually over the last 2 or 3 years, there's been basically a large influx of people coming from places like Honduras and Nicaragua. One of the reasons why is because they're basically are these internal gang warfare happening in these countries, and it's extremely violent, and people really are at risk of murder, of rape. And so a lot of very young children have been crossing multiple borders to get to the US. They're not trying to enter, without inspection. Oftentimes they present themselves to border agents and say, we can't go back, and what happens is that they get put into detention facilities. There are several detention facilities in Texas and across the border that are housing children as young as like 4 years old.
Are they privately run?
Yes, these are privately run facilities. So yes, they can. If they see a lawyer, there are lawyers present. They can be released to a relative. There are many of those individuals in New York. I think it's about 10,000 young children in New York now, living in Long Island, upstate.
Is it thought that ICE might come and take them all away?
Well, so a lot of them actually have pending cases.
So they can't.
And so that's actually part of the backlog. So one of the big backlogs is also like you have all of these young children who have court dates. And, we've heard stories of young children who there's not enough lawyers, and children who appear for their court date. They don't have a lawyer, they're 10 years old, and they present a report card with their their A+ grades to a judge to be like, please let me stay. Like, this is like what we're dealing with in Central America is a humanitarian refugee crisis, and the United States government will not recognize it to be just that.
So we're calling the young people who come from South America refugees.
Well, we call them refugees.
What's the difference between how do you differentiate?
So the young children coming from Central America, we call them unaccompanied minors because oftentimes they are without an adult.
I see.
To be officially considered a refugee, that's a status that's has to be.
So they have to prove that if they go back, it's dangerous, or they've been mistreated or something. So the other thing that happens, which recently I think happened in New York State, is that ICE goes into a business which has hired undocumented and deports those people. So here we have undocumented residents who are working and are productive, contributing to the economy, and yet because they're working, they're under extra danger.
Yeah, so that just happened in Buffalo. In Buffalo, 25 people were detained. There was workplace raids on 3 different Mexican restaurants, and there were undocumented workers. And that's the thing. It's like under President Obama, we really pushed to stop these workplace raids because all they do is just create so much fear in communities. A lot of these individuals are just like trying to make a living. They're not doing anything to harm communities. What basically is assumed to happen under President-elect is there's going to be an expansion of workplace raids. And it really doesn't make communities safer. What ends up happening is that people do not report actual crimes to police. It really makes, there's a major distrust, therefore, between communities and police. And everyone goes back into the shadows. It's not an effective way to deal with a broken immigration system. What we need is fair and just immigration reform that actually allows people a path to come here in a way that makes sense. Otherwise, if you live in a Western country like the U.S. that is much wealthier than other places, where else do people want to go? They want to come to places like this.
Right, because it used to be the most welcoming place. Why do you think Obama has had so many people deported?
So I think that this is the thing about President Obama, is that I think that what he was trying to do, and I disagree with this strategy, and I think that in the long term it clearly is to our detriment, because President-elect Trump is going to take it and make it something else, is that he was really trying to set it up so that there could be bipartisan support for immigration reform. And so in order to get to that place, he decided, okay, well, we will deport people who have, quote unquote, like these criminal convictions, and we will make the border secure, and we will, get rid of these so-called criminals. And then at that point, we can work on immigration reform. And actually, if you think about it, Donald Trump's language might be harsher, but President Obama was in a lot of circles considered the quote unquote deporter in chief. In the 8 years of President Obama being president, 2.5 million people were deported.
And were they mostly from workplace?
No, they were not. So actually, ironically, a lot of them were from traffic violations and traffic stops. And so this is where it gets complicated when we go into the piece around criminality, because there are not 2 to 3 million people who are quote unquote criminals. What you're doing is creating criminals. So for example, if a young person jumps a turnstile and they are undocumented, in the past, basically, that would be, if they were arrested and their fingerprints went through ICE, they could be deported. If you ran a red light, you could be deported.
So there's no difference between a felony and a misdemeanor or just a ticket.
And one of the things we did in President Obama's term, 2 terms, was that we pushed for him to have it where localities did not collaborate with immigration customs enforcement, but also where these low-level offenses were not crime reasons for deportation. And we pushed for him to provide prosecutorial discretion, which basically means that ICE agents, you can provide a case for someone and be like, well, this person has a U.S. citizen family, this is a low-level crime, he's shown that he's not a threat, and be able to get a stay for that person.
The irony of it is that real criminals, people who've really been on trial and convicted of murder, robbery, armed robbery, all those kinds of things, we keep them in prison. We pay for them to be in prison, and then when they've served their prison term, we deport them, which makes no sense either. So it is that whole criminal justice area that really needs to be really defined and investigated.
And I really recommend that your viewers watch this documentary that's out right now by Ava DuVernay. It's called 13th. And it really talks about the criminal justice system and the ways in which criminalization is sort of manufactured and what that means in terms of private prisons.
How can you find that?
It's on Netflix. It's called
13th.
On
Netflix, on 13. Now, how did you get into all of this work?
I'm an immigrant. I came to the U.S. in 2003. I'm originally from Sri Lanka, but I grew up in Thailand. I got a full scholarship to a university in Western Massachusetts. So that's how I came, and after...
You came as a student?
I came as a student.
And then what happened?
And I had a work visa for a year, so I moved to New York, and then I got a full scholarship to graduate school at the University of Massachusetts, and then afterwards I ended up working at the New York Immigration Coalition. But, I think it was really after college when I had decided that, well, this is where my community is, like I want to stay, and I was having a really difficult time myself staying and being able to get a longer term visa. And that's when I started to really realize sort of the ways in which immigration really impacts people in this country. Because if for someone like me, and I'm extremely privileged, you know, I went to an American international school in Asia, like, you know, if for someone like me it was so hard to stay, for someone like my sister right now who is really struggling to stay, then I just understand the situation.
You can imagine what other people are going through.
Exactly, and so it really was out of solidarity that I started doing this work. You know, my family really was able to migrate because of education, and I believe that people have the right to migrate and to live where they want to live. One of my first jobs out of college was working for the Applied Research Center, where I was the primary researcher on a book that was about 9/11 and the Twin Towers, and basically all of the undocumented workers who worked in the Twin Towers, who, you know, when they fell, their families got no support or services because their families had also been killed. And so it was really through doing that research and doing a lot of work with restaurant workers and undocumented workers that I came to this work.
Now tell me, say your beautiful name that I have trouble with.
It's Thanu Yakupitiyage.
And tell me the definition of the word.
So Thanu means, it's just the rhythm of music, basically.
Yeah. So I just wanted to tell people, what else do you do? You're a DJ.
I am also a DJ, yeah.
And why do you like that?
I like DJing because it's sort of a different kind of community organizing tool. I play a lot of music from all over the world, and the party that me and my friend Beto, who's Mexican, throw is a really sort of international and global party, and we really use the dance floor as a way to kind of create the worlds that we want to create. And I think that it's a good microcosm of how to really be loving and good to people.
Thank you, Thanu. This has been wonderful, and we're so lucky, I guess, really, to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you
for having me.
Thank you. Yep. We at CUNY TV always like to hear from our viewers. So if you have any subjects you'd like to explore or people you'd like to hear, please let us know. Write to us at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or go to our website, cuny.tv, and click on Contact Us. We look forward to hearing from you.